Доброго дня, шановні учасники! Вітаємо вас на черговій лекції нашого постійного проєкту «Лекції майбутнього». Нагадую, це цикл лекцій від лауреатів Нобелівської премії, які презентують власні дослідження та мотиваційні промови. Оголошення та посилання на реєстрацію на наступні травневі і червневі лекції ви можете знайти на оновленому сайті Mango.ua, а також на офіційних сторінках Малої академії наук в соціальних мережах, таких як Facebook та Instagram. Нагадую, ми оновили наш сайт Mango.ua. Якщо ви ще не долучились і не поюзали, і не дізнались про нові навчальні матеріали, освітні можливості, будь ласка, запрошуємо і будемо раді вас бачити на нашому сайті. Мене звати Валерія, я модеруватиму сьогодні цю лекцію разом зі своїми колегами. Дмитро, він є співорганізатором цієї конференції, а також паном Денисом, який люб'язно нам погодився допомогти з синхронним перекладом лекцій з англійської на українську мову. Перед початком лекції хочу уточнити декілька організаційних та технічних моментів з приводу нашої сьогоднішньої зустрічі. По-перше, з огляду безпеки всі мікрофони, камери, аватари вимкнені з огляду безпеки. Також вимкнена можливість писати в спільний чат та особисті повідомлення між учасниками. Ви можете писати повідомлення співорганізаторам конференції, мені або Дмитрові. Якщо ви раптом відключитесь від конференції з огляду нестабільного інтернету або інших причин, будь ласка, зайдіть за посиланням, яке ви отримали на свою пошту, і протягом хвилини, 30 секунд вас буде доєднано до конференції. Ви можете задати питання спікеру нашої сьогодні зустрічі шляхом написання вашого питання мені або Дмитрові в особисті повідомлення. Прохання писати одне питання, не копіювати його і не пересилати, оскільки вони дуже швидко губляться. Також прохання писати чіткі лаконічні повідомлення без описової частини, якщо це можливо. У вас є можливість обрати мову, якою ви будете слухати лекцію, українську або англійська. Для цього, будь ласка, в нижній панелі Zoom натисніть на кнопку Interpretation, вона розташована між кнопками «Запис» та «Реакції», і оберіть мову, якій ви надаєте перевагу. Ви можете змінювати свій вибір протягом лекції з англійської на українську або навпаки. Сьогодні я маю честь представити лауреата Нобелівської премії з фізики Джорджа Сміта, який отримав цю почесну відзнаку за розробку оптичних напівпровідникових сенсорів. Сьогодні у нас особлива лекція, незвичайна. Вона в першу чергу буде спрямована на взаємодію з вами і на сесію питань-відповідей. Ми матимемо дуже коротку лекційну частину, і більшу частину часу ми поділимо питання. Тому прохання, формулюйте ваші питання заздалегідь, для того, щоб ми їх могли зафіксувати, згрупувати і перекласти, якщо ви задаєте їх українською мовою. Якщо є можливість, прохання писати їх англійською, тому що питань буде багато, сесія питань-відповідей буде довша, ніж зазвичай, тому для того, щоб ми встигли перекласти ваші питання, будь ласка, формулюйте їх конкретно або одразу англійською мовою. So, dear Professor, good afternoon. Again, on behalf of Junior Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, I welcome you to our project, Lectures of the Future. Thank you very much for joining and presenting your masterclass for Ukrainian school students, and young scientists. And it's very great honor to give you the floor now.
Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone. It's a privilege to be able to talk with you, like you and like anyone who's been following the dreadful news from Ukraine. I've been thinking a lot about borders in the last 3 months. But I've also been thinking a lot about ideas. And I'm going to talk about both of those because I think that they are very closely related. I'm going to start talking about ideas, and then I'm going to get to their relationship with borders. So this is my cartoon for a brain. The black thing is a representation of the brain, and those colored bars inside represent ideas. And ideas are like elements of thoughts, something like a scientific discovery or a technological innovation, something like that. It's a very vague term, and certainly it's not a complete parallel because ideas really aren't items as represented here, but I think it's useful to think of them as if they were. I'm going to use a virus, such as the SARS-CoV-2 virus that's caused this pandemic, as a metaphor for an idea. So what I mean by a metaphor is that there are ways in which a virus behaves like ideas in our brains. That yellow bar, the colored bar inside, represents the virus's chromosome, and the virus is a machine for delivering that chromosome into a cell. That's what we call cell infection. And the virus that this metaphorical, the chromosome that this metaphorical virus delivers, is an idea that's delivered into a brain. That's what I mean by this metaphor. Before I start talking about that metaphor, I should say that there's a personal reason that I am inclined to use viruses as a metaphor for ideas, because in 2019, Greg Winter and I shared half of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for development of a technology called phage display. Phages are viruses that infect bacteria. They're not harmful to people. Anyway, our brains are full of bright ideas, and those ideas are constantly multiplying. And as they multiply, they undergo tiny changes. And you could think of these as mental mutations. Changes in the ideas are like mutations in the chromosomes of virus chromosomes in an infected cell. And as they multiply and mutate, they also interact with each other on a massive scale. And that produces a great multiplicity of sort of mixed ideas of multiple parentage. When we speak, when we write, when we make things that other people can use, when we do other things that are public, we are in effect releasing our ideas into the environment. In fact, we produce an environment that's rich in infectious ideas, ideas in a form that can infect other brains. I'm calling this an ideasphere. An ideasphere is analogous to a biosphere, a collection of living things in the natural world. When we read, when we hear people speaking, when we use things others make, when we otherwise observe, we are in effect other people's ideas are infecting our own brains, adding to the huge number of ideas that are already there. All this multiplication of ideas has to be balanced by elimination of ideas. Most ideas die in obscurity. We ignore them in our own brains. We don't happen to release them out into the environment, or if they do, they don't infect other people's brains. And all that elimination is balanced by a creation of other more fit ideas. It's cultural selection that's analogous to selection by natural selection, which is the core of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution in the natural world. So this is the cultural analog of natural selection in the natural world. Sometimes there arise, you might call them superstar ideas. These are ideas that multiply in the idea sphere at a much greater rate than most ideas. You could think of them as kind of like the Omicron variant of SARS-CoV-2 viruses that has swept across the world. I think that all cultural achievements, and that includes scientific discoveries and technological innovations, what you are going to be most concerned about in your careers, are created by huge global communities of scientists that share their infectious ideas with each other. And to some extent, those ideas are shared in the form of material resources, things like that. This is how scientific advances and technological innovations arise. They arise in communities, not from individuals. Communities are absolutely essential, I think, to the creativity of science. And if we want to preserve the creativity of science, of technology, and of culture in general, we have to maintain and expand the global community of people, of brains, as I've represented them here, that cooperate with each other by sharing their ideas. I'd like to point out another way that I think sharing of ideas is absolutely essential for the success of culture in general, and certainly of science and engineering in particular. And that is that it is an essential component, an essential way that we scientists get the most important rewards for our science. And that is the respect of our scientific peers, of other scientists. We crave recognition for our scientific achievements, the things that we do. We crave that. You are young scientists, and I'm sure that it's true that already many of you, if not all of you, are ambitious to be recognized for the things that you will accomplish. But how can we do this if we don't share our ideas? So we workers, science workers, like this science teacher, this math teacher, strive to earn the recognition of our fellow scientists by explaining our ideas clearly to our students, to our colleagues, in writing or spoken word. If we're researchers, we strive to earn respect by carefully designing workmanlike experiments to support our ideas, by sharing our material resources of our work with other scientists. This is how I think we earn respect. And is this not a noble ambition for us? And it's an ambition that depends on our enthusiasm and our hard work, our diligence. Like the enthusiasm and the hard work or the diligence that's evident in this teacher who is teaching Ukrainian students. This, I think, is the biggest reward that we strive for. Of course, we also, as scientists, require that we be paid for our labor, but I think the cultural award is what really drives our ambition. Belligerent borders, like the Iron Curtain that has descended now between Russia and Ukraine, are the enemy of the sharing of ideas, the enemy of the progress of and creativity of science that depends on the free sharing of ideas. Of course, they do a lot by killing brains, but they also destroy the material resources of culture, including science and engineering innovations. They tend to fill up the idea sphere with thoughts of war and of revenge rather than creative ideas of progress in science, in technology, and in culture in general. I dearly hope that when this dreadful war is over, that young scientists of Ukraine and everywhere in the world will join their brothers and sisters in Russia and all over the world to repair and expand the global community, the global cultural community of culture in general and of science and technology in particular, to expand the creativity of human culture. Thank you very much, and I'd be glad to respond to questions and comments.
Thank you very much. We have already some questions. So first of all, I will ask some questions related to the topic of research, some scientific questions, and then I will move on to some motivational and overall part. So the first question is from Konstantin. So what will be if there was no idea sphere near our own thoughts?
If there was no idea sphere in what? In what?
Near our own thoughts.
In our own thoughts?
Yeah. If there is no idea sphere.
If there's no ideas in someone's brain, that can't be, I don't think. Because if you're alive, for sure you have thoughts, you have ideas, and we don't tend to think of, the ordinary thoughts in our brains as like theories or scientific ideas, but I don't think there's a demarcation between ordinary thoughts and science thoughts. They're all thoughts. They're all ways of understanding the world. I don't think it's possible to be alive and not have ideas in your brain, in your brains. Really, I don't know if this is getting to the question, but I don't think any of you have to worry about not having thoughts and ideas in your brain.
Okay, we will wonder about it. So the next question is from Darina. Why do you think the coronavirus became the epicenter of attention and caused so much panic in humanity?
So why did the coronavirus take such a central stage in as this pandemic started? Well, maybe I should hark back 100 years to 1918, when a very lethal strain of the influenza virus raged over the world. During that pandemic that lasted from 1918, really started in 1917 to pretty much close to 1920, pretty much the length of this pandemic, it's sure that it killed at least 50 million people over the world. And of course, there were many, many fewer people in the world then. But because in 1918, 1917, 18, 19, there were vast tracts of the world in sub-Saharan Africa, over much of Asia, that didn't have modern communication. Undoubtedly, the death toll was even bigger. So, epidemiologists, the scientists who study infectious diseases and the way they spread in pandemics, were extremely concerned about this. And it could have been a much worse pandemic. I think it might well have been a worse pandemic if China had not, right from the beginning, done a really massive campaign to stop the spread of the virus within China. Because if it had spread widely in China, it would have surely spread even faster in the rest of the world. It was only when the very mild pandemic in China made its way to Europe, especially right in Italy, that it became a worldwide pandemic. But we had to pay attention to that because of the threat that this could have been something much, much worse, like the influenza pandemic in 1918. And even though this was has been a much lesser pandemic, partly because of technology, for example, the vaccines, but even so, just consider that how many people personally, your families, that maybe you yourself know that have had this disease or that have died of it. We, in the United States, which have had pretty severe form of this pandemic. I mean, virtually all of us know someone that died from this pandemic. So how could we not pay attention to it? So it's a good thing, I think, that we paid attention to it. It shouldn't eclipse attention to every other thing that's going on in the world. For example, as I'm sure that you're all aware of, all the prelude to this dreadful war that we're experiencing now. That we mustn't lose sight of those things, but it's not surprising that we paid so much attention to the pandemic.
Yes, the next question is from Volodymyr. In your opinion, do ideas can have an effect on cognitive ability, or they just show interest?
So Volodymyr asked if ideas can have an effect on our mental ability.
Cognitive ability, or they show interest.
Yeah, well, of course, this is way outside the metaphor that I was using, which is a much simpler and more confined metaphor. But surely, paying attention to your ideas and working with them and making them multiply faster and making them recombine with each other and mutating them, that is changing them in your head, it makes your brain more alive, I think, for sure. But believe me, I'm not a psychologist. This is way outside my area of expertise. But I think that everyone that manipulates thoughts in their head has a more lively life and a more lively mental life in particular than if you don't. But I think it's pretty hard to avoid paying attention to your thoughts, really. But if you're a scientist, your thoughts tend to be much more focused on the science that you're doing than if you're, a baker, say. But if you're a baker, you're thinking about the science of baking, etc. I do think that our well-being, our livelihood depends on how lively our brains are. But I am speaking way outside any area of competence here.
Okay, the next question is from Ivana. Is it true that ideas are some kind of viruses, but they are materialistic? Do we have some idea creation and idea storing cells in our brain?
Okay, Valeria, you're going to have to repeat that for me. I know there's some ideas that I didn't get what the questioner is saying about. These are special ideas in some way.
So is it true that ideas are some kind of viruses, but they are materialistic? Yeah, but they are materialistic at the same time.
Yes, well, you can have viral ideas about viruses. And of course, we're talking about two different physical realms here. I mean, ideas are, electrical signals in your brain, ultimately. And viruses are physically a different thing. Am I off this question? I'm having a hard time really understanding, I think, what she's asked or he's asking for. Am I off here? Maybe you can restate it in your own words.
Maybe I can ask Ivana just to rephrase her question a little bit in the next question. So now we can move to the next one. So the question from Alexander. Should you focus on your own ideas that maybe are not so popular or advanced, or should you work on topics that are already well known for everyone?
Well, that is an excellent question. And I really do think that we must, if we are going to contribute greatly to the idea sphere, as I'm calling it, I think we really have to pay attention to our own ideas. But no scientist, as I'm sure you all know, because many of you are students, no scientist can get along ignoring the ideas of others. For example, the ideas of your teacher. You know, your teacher will probably criticize, you might say, some ideas that you have and say, you know, Ivan or Ivana or whoever, maybe, or Alexander, maybe here's the problem with your idea. Maybe you should think about it again. That's why we have to share ideas freely among each other. If we don't allow our brains to be infected by other people's ideas. Our ideas in isolation in our own brains are much less creative than ideas that interact with other ideas. That's why I think that advances in culture, including in science and engineering, arise from communities, not from individuals. Each individual, though, plays a key role in contributing their own ideas, which in some cases are just like combinations of ideas that have previously infected their own brains.
Okay, we came back to our previous question. So the question is from Ivana is about, are ideas materialistic or they exist on some mental level?
So what the first are, do they exist in a mental level or do they exist physically? Is that what she's asking?
Yeah, like materialistic. You think about it and
materially.
Then it appears, or I don't know, it happens.
Well, that's a good question, and I think it gets to the limitations of metaphors, because of course a virus and the chromosome inside a virus is a physical entity, and of course ideas have a physical there's a physical underpinning of those ideas, because they exist because of electrical circuits in our brain. Ultimately they have to be like that, but they're not confined entities that are comparable to the way that a chromosome is a really pretty well-defined physical object. But that's really not true, I think, of ideas. And this shows that metaphors are incomplete. They're very much, they help us understand, but we must always keep in mind that metaphors are an incomplete parallel with the thing that they are illuminating. So a metaphor is something you think you understand pretty well, like a virus, that's helping you to understand something you don't understand quite so well, which is like ideas. But a metaphor is never a complete model of the thing that you're trying to understand. I mean, a good example of a metaphor is a mathematical model. A mathematical model is a mental construct. We symbolize it with notations on a piece of paper, and it's a way that it's something that behaves in mathematical ways that's very parallel to how we think the physical object that we are modeling behaves, but it's not the physical object. The writing on a piece of paper is not the physical object like a a neutron, or something in physical space. It's like that thing in important ways. So I don't think ideas are physical objects in anything like the same way that a virus chromosome is, but it certainly has physical things in our brains as a substrate of it, but they are not objects like that, I think.
Okay, the next question is from Alisa. How we can train our brain to produce more unique and creative ideas?
More and better ideas?
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think enthusiasm and diligence, working hard, is really important here. I mean, I don't know if there's special, like athletes might do weight training or running or things like that. I'm not sure that there's exactly specific exercises that make your mental brains bigger the way that lifting weights makes your arm muscles bigger. I'm not sure it's like that, but it's paying attention and being ambitious, really. I mean, I think that being ambitious to understand and to share your understanding with others, that's so important. It's your your desire, your ambition to participate, to be a good member of the science or the cultural community in general. I think is what's really important. And of course, that means being part of the community means that when you're a student, a big part of your community are your teachers. You do have to pay attention to their ideas and your own ideas. I really think that it's ambitious, but I don't think that ambition as a student is necessarily to please your teacher so much as to take in the ideas, what your teacher is offering to you, which is ideas. Take in those ideas seriously. Maybe some of them you'll reject. That's good. Teachers, I'm a teacher for 40 years. As I'm retired from my university, but I was a teacher for 40 years. Teachers love it when students challenge them and saying that they're wrong and asking the teacher to defend what the idea that the teacher has told them. And of course, teachers are wrong, just like everyone, of course. And there's nothing magical about being a teacher. Some things are magical about being a teacher, I think, but no, teachers are human just like everyone else. And so that's one thing, just challenging your teacher if you think the teacher's got it wrong, if the teacher's made a mistake.
Okay, actually we have related question to this talk. So the question is from Tatiana. How to find yourself when you have a lot of ideas? Because it is often scary to make mistake, starting to develop in a certain direction.
I do think it's really, really important in culture in general, in science, mathematics, engineering, etc. All these disciplines, it's really important not to be afraid of making mistakes, because then if you're too fearful, you'll never release an idea out into the idea sphere. And if you don't release an idea out into the idea sphere, if it's a wrong idea, you won't learn that, oh, maybe I should change that idea. Or maybe I should combine it with another idea and get a better idea. I mean, we do really, really have to be willing to make mistakes. I mean, any learner is making mistakes because it's an essential part of learning. And scientists learn this all the time. We make ideas and then we do experiments that, for example, show that the idea is wrong, and we realize, oh, we've got to change that idea. Or maybe we make more serious ideas and write it in an article, and someone criticizes that article, and we realize, oh, that was a bad idea. Oh, we've got to live with that. We absolutely have to live with that. But I don't think that scientists, engineers, mathematicians, I honestly don't think that they suffer when they learn they're wrong. I mean, it is a recognized part of progress in your own brain and in the community as a whole, of correcting ideas that turn out not to be very good ideas.
Okay, the next question is from Anastasia. Is it possible to control or influence the idea of other people? And can we learn how to do it?
Mind control, brainwashing. Well, I mean, we think today a lot about the way regimes try to control news and other ways that people learn. For example, shutting down the internet, which is a way of sharing ideas around the world, of controlling newspapers and television, shutting them down if they say things that the regime doesn't like. You could say that is a way of controlling ideas. It's pretty hard to control ideas like that. I mean, in the news today, we see still all across Russia, especially the part that's closest to Ukraine, people who go out in the streets and demonstrate against this war. Yet Vonya, you see these signs all over the place in Russia, and these are people. They're people, even many of them my age, who are willing to be tackled by the police, thrown in jail, maybe go to jail for years in order to get their ideas out. So yeah, it's hard, I think, to control the ideas in our brains. But it's not that some regimes try to do that. I don't think in the long term very successfully.
Yeah, and we have a related question to your answer, actually. The question is from Kirill. If we have idea viruses, so what can be called a vaccine against bad ideas?
A vaccine against an idea. Well, we are expanding this metaphor beyond its really useful idea, but a vaccine against idea. I think people talk in these terms of vaccinating us against propaganda. A vaccine against propaganda. That is, it's an idea that infects you, that makes you better able to recognize propaganda and not pay attention to it. I'm not sure this is a very good model. I do think we have to take our personal responsibility because these vaccines themselves could be themselves propaganda that we shouldn't be allowing a regime to infect our brains with. So I think that and it's pretty hard to control the ideas in our brains. I'm sure that all of you, almost all of you know this, that you can't, you can't, people on the outside just can't control the things that go on in your own mind. Your own mind is yours. So I don't think in the long run there's much prospect for a really successful vaccine against ideas. And I'm not sure that vaccines against ideas really are a good idea in the first place. I'm not sure there's something we should strive for. And maybe we should strive against such ideas. Freedom of thought would be against the vaccine. And of course, this is in this way, ideas are nothing like pandemics and the viruses that cause pandemics.
Okay, the next question is from Taras. So in your opinion, is it important for a scientist to be the best in his area of expertise, or it's okay if you have fun and enjoy of your work?
Oh, you probably know the answer to this already from what I've said. The latter, being enthusiastic yourself. Just think of that teacher that I showed a picture of the teacher who was teaching. I don't know if she's Ukrainian or not, but probably she was teaching Ukrainian students in Romania. And you can just see on her face what a good life she probably has. I mean, this is such an enthusiastic person. Could anyone be more satisfied with their life than someone like that teacher? And if we think that the only way we can be happy with our life is if we have the incredible good luck and just by chance to be have some kind of fame like a Nobel Prize. This is just a really bad way to plan your life. That is of almost of tiny importance in culture. It's much more important the satisfaction that you yourself have in your community, being a good contributing member of your community, which means that your ideas are spreading around. And maybe your ideas are like physical things. Maybe you are the most celebrated baker in your town, in your village. That would be a satisfying life. Absolutely. It's your personal satisfaction is yours, and it doesn't depend on some, like standard of greatness. Absolutely, I don't think so.
Okay, we have, actually we can move to the second part of our questions about your motivation. So we have several questions about your favorite books and books you can recommend to get more ideas.
Oh, favorite books. Well, I would say that my favorite books for most of my adult life, maybe not so much recently, were books in science, but especially mathematics. I remember one summer, this is after I graduated from college, the year after I graduated from college, when it was during summer vacation, and I had a book on differential equations, a math book. I mean, this is elementary mathematics. I mean, it's like calculus, stuff like that. But and for some of you that might seem advanced, but this is pretty elementary. But the book was just beautifully written, and it was thrilling. I love that type of thing. A little earlier in my life, I was a radio amateur. I loved radios and so on. And in the United States, we had a handbook for young radio amateurs. So this is when I was about 12. And I just read that book, and I learned mathematics from it. Didn't call it mathematics, but you learn how circuits work. I love things like that. But now I think it's in my maturity, after I'm no longer a teacher and no longer a researcher, I have read books like that are of more broad cultural interest. I'm reading a book now by an Indian author named Amitav Ghosh about India, about Bengal, Calcutta, during the time of the Opium Wars. And it's just a gripping book. And it also tells us a lot about the origins of our world, especially the colonial world. And colonization is a really important subject to me now. Like the United States is basically what's called a settler colonial regime. That is, foreign settlers from Europe came to North America, and their idea was that they were going to become the owners of that land, and my ancestors expelled the native people to other places, and this is and killed many of them. This is called settler colonialism, and I think that, to me, that's a very important topic. And colonialism is at the core of a lot of writing that I read today, including by this Indian author named Amitav Ghosh.
Okay, the next question is, what is your current project? What do you investigate today?
What are my current projects? Well, I do very little science, but I'll talk about one project that I am collaborating with a young colleague in my university. And this is a project, a SARS-CoV-2 project. So the project is to, I should say that my colleague is called Dr. Poop in our university. I hope there's a Ukrainian translation of that. Because what he does is he surveils wastewater from toilets and from a whole city, our own city. There's a treatment plant where all the waste from our city collects. And he takes samples of that wastewater and he searches it for the coronavirus very sensitively using the polymerase chain reaction, or PCR. I don't know what the abbreviation is in Ukrainian. But he and I are working on a project to try to see which of course, almost all of this coronaviruses that he finds in wastewater come from people. But we are working on a project to see if any of the virus that's in the wastewater has come from an animal rather than from people. So we're using a difference in the viruses that are released by animal cells from viruses that are released by human cells to try to test the wastewater for any coronavirus, any SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus that comes from animals rather than people. And this is an important aspect of epidemiology, because many diseases, pandemic diseases that spread over the world, such as malaria, for example, have animal reservoirs that where animals in the wild have the disease and perpetuate have the virus or have the disease, the infectious disease, and perpetuate the disease, but it can also be passed to humans. That's an important part, for example, of malaria. And this is something that epidemiologists try to monitor in pretty much all infectious diseases. And we already know almost certainly that the human coronaviruses have come originally from animals. Almost certainly SARS in 2003 and SARS-CoV-2, the new one, can come from bats originally. They might have been transmitted to another intermediate animal and ultimately to people. We're not sure of that, but it's very important for epidemiologists to follow the infections in animals, potential reservoirs for a disease. So, and influenza is another perfect example of that. There are hundreds and hundreds of strains of influenza in birds. Only a few of them have been transmitted to animals. So this is along that line. We are looking to see if we can surveil wastewater for the presence of virus that is from animals, the coronavirus that's from animals rather than from people. That would give an example of some science that I'm doing today.
Okay, the next question is from Mikhailo. How to find the motivation to start the project, to implement the idea, to do science overall?
Well, how to find the motivation? I think that, experimental science, you have to want to do something that you really want to do. If you're not ambitious to do science, maybe you're ambitious about something else. Maybe that something else is what your life should be about. I do think that you have to. I'm not sure you can. I don't know how to advise someone to create ambition. I mean, I think I just had it right from the beginning, from being a little boy. I started loving snakes. I was ambitious to learn about snakes and to tell other people about snakes. I don't know, it was just there. I don't know how to create it if it's not there already, but I doubt that any of you doesn't have ambition about something, sports or whatever it is. And I don't know how to create ambition. Boy, this is a bad answer to this question, isn't it? This is not a helpful answer. Okay, maybe I'm not the right person to answer it.
Maybe, but it's personal stuff, so we should find our motivation. And we have a traditional question in the end. So what pieces of advice can you provide to young scientists, to young students who just start to do science?
I think that I have already given my advice, because I think that I think that the motivation, your ambition, is what's most important. Following that ambition, and you should follow what you are really, really interested in. And if it's not things that perhaps your parents or your teachers are encouraging you to do, you still should pay attention to your own ambitions, regardless of whether they fit into what your parents or teachers or whatever, or maybe society as a whole is thinks that you should be ambitious about. You should set out for a life that's going to be satisfying for you. And I think that means following your own ambitions in life.
Okay, we have many questions left, but we have limitation of time. So I want to thank you for joining the project, for presenting your presentation and answering all questions. Thank you very much, and see. Yeah.
And thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity. And good luck to everyone. And let us hope that shortly we will live in better times than we do now.
Thank you very much. Шановні учасники, дякую всім, хто приєднався до нашої лекції. Нагадую, що в травні ми маємо дуже насичений графік. Будь ласка, заходьте на сайт, реєструйтесь за посиланням і отримайте новини про нові наші лекції. Наступна лекція вже завтра, нагадую. Так, тому реєструйтесь і не забувайте доєднуватись до нашого проєкту. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and goodbye.